Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the #1 source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
We need a little sign at some point for the studio, and we'll light it up when we're getting just the vibe that a trade might be imminent or we're in trade season, because this is the trade deadline preview episode. We're recording Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening. By the time you hear this, everything could have changed. And it's Steve Yzerman we're talking about. So we're no longer like anxious about, we have to wait for the exact moment, or this could be coming or that could be coming. You can't control the universe. You just have to flow with it. And the least we could do for the listeners is just throw the light on that says trades incoming, or this could expire soon, or something like that.
Things may or may not be happening. There may be trades. Some may involve the Red Wings. Others may not. We're going to find out.
That's the NHL summarized. And again, this episode, Evan's not here. And everyone gets mad at you and I, Brad, when that happens. But we didn't, despite my best efforts, we didn't do any jinxing last time. So
yes, thank you for bringing that. Do you know how many people, when the Red Wings won that losing streak, says that was my fault? I specifically went out of my way to do the opposite of what we did last year when it went off the rails. So it either is in no way my fault, or there's nothing I can do to prevent it. It's always my fault. Because I went complete opposite. So just me existing might be the issue, which is plausible. I'm not ruling it out. But my actions did not sway it this time.
Brad, in July of 1987, Brad Crisco was born, and scientists to this day still proclaim that that was the biggest mistake the universe ever made.
4 Stanley Cups for the Red Wings since then, though. So I don't know if I'm buying into the theories fully.
All right, folks, trade deadline preview episode. Let's just jump into this because we know we're in no way in control of this, so we may as well just do the show. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and the trade deadline. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And Evan is not here. We're thinking of him. He wants to be here. He'll be back soon, and I'm sure whatever Brad and I mess up, we'll hear about promptly from Evan. On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to talk to you about the one Detroit Red Wings game that happened last night. It was disappointing. Seems to be a trend. We'll talk about takeaways from that game and the news that happened in the Red Wings roster afterwards, as Christian Fischer got waived, yes, but Carter Mazur was recalled, and he's going to hopefully be making his NHL debut soon here on Thursday, so that is exciting news for the world of the Red Wings and the Griffins. We are then going to get into our trade deadline preview, starting with Steve Yzerman and the Detroit Red Wings, the trade that they made today. Small fries, but still a trade that they made today to acquire a 4th-round pick with their cap space. What else could be coming for the Red Wings? Predictions, analysis, who's out there for them that could be a fit. And then getting into the rest of the league, what's happened, what could happen, all of that, lots more. And this is our first episode of a crossover with What Chaos, the show with DJ Bean and Pete over there. Really excited to chat to DJ Bean on this episode. Fun conversation. I grilled him on the Bruins because they're based out of Boston, and I pulled the pasta card to see what we can get out of that. So that's a fun conversation. Really excited to cross over with those guys. They do great work. All of that and more before we jump into overtime. Before all that, very quickly, if you want to support the Winged Wheel Podcast, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. You get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. We let loose, have fun. Brad's going to tell a horrifically funny story today on this one.
Oh, God.
Bloopers, all of that and more. You also are automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, going directly to our Patreon supporters. Additionally, you get access to our Patreon exclusive Winged Wheel Podcast Discord. Again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. The Carolina Hurricanes came to town. Detroit was decked out in their Stadium Series gear, and that game was almost completely start to finish what ails us in capital letters for the Red Wings, and they lost 2-1. I hate to oversimplify it, but it really was just more of the same. It was ugly goals going in. It was defensive lapses. It was lackluster effort from pretty much all 5 players on the ice for a certain goal. The top line is still struggling. We're starting to see the initial rush and positive wave from the young players start to wane as the rest of the roster struggles. So do they. And the Red Wings it was too little too late. They had one fleeting moment there with Soderblom, who had a great play to score, and that was it.
The warning signs have been flashing on the dash all year about certain things, and we have talked about them at length over and over again. Not so much in the heater because we were trying to enjoy it, but some of those warning signs were still there. And we're not particularly smart people. We weren't the only people that were noticing these things. Everybody knows most rookies hit a wall at some point in the rookie season, no matter how good they're going. Edmonton's still been really good, but softened a little bit. Johansson's been really good, softened a little bit. Kasper's been really good, softened a little bit. Soderblom's up and down, but that's kind of how he's always been. So you had to expect the lull, we'll call it for a polite term, was going to come. We knew that Larkin, Raymond, Kane were going to hit a slump at some point. Everybody does. Connor McDavid just had an 8-game goalless drought. The best players in the world have slumps. You knew it was coming. And the concern all year was if that top line hits a cold spell or that power play hits a cold spell and the rookies aren't scorching hot, there's nobody else on this roster that can step up to drive the bus because they haven't been doing anything all year. Yes, losing Rasmussen hurts. Yes, losing Kopp hurts. But there are so many other players on this roster who, when the chips are down, need to make a play. And they haven't been there all year. And they weren't there, predictably, when the team needed them to be. And the question now becomes, is the rest of the season going to look like that Carolina game? Because you summed it up well. There's no point in going play by play through some of those because everybody knows. Or can a Veleno, a Comfer, anybody step up and make a play when they need it when the rest of the team isn't running hot? Maybe Larkin and Raymond bounce back before that happens and we don't need to worry about it. Maybe Edvinsson and Soderblom and Berggren and whoever find their step, and there's a million ways they could bounce back. The reality is this was predictable. We mentioned it in brief during the heater, just be like, hey guys, this hasn't resolved itself. Not trying to dampen the mood. We talked about it a lot when they were garbage before McLellan took over.
Yeah, there's an overconcentration of it at that point.
Yeah, and again, this is what this team is. Now, the optimistic view here. Everything has gone wrong at once. The top line's cooled off, the power play's cooled off, the rookies cooled off, the goalies can't make a save. We talk about unsustainability when things are running hot. There's also unsustainability to when things run cold. That top line is not going to stay cold forever. That power play is not going to stay cold forever. Some of these rookies are going to contribute again, and the goalies will start making a save. You probably need 3 or 4 of them going for a majority of the season to make the playoffs, but you can probably reliably spin a wheel and pick 2 of them to get right in the short term, and then you hope 3 or 4 follows along. So, again, it sucks. Everybody's right to be as angry as they are. Believe me, I'm just as frustrated as everybody else because here we are in March. You can set your watch to it. Oh, back-to-back against a team you're competing for a playoff spot with. You drop both. You have a crucial game to maybe get a bounce back right after. You lose that one. Like, we've been here before. To me, that's almost the most concerning part.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. Like, it's nothing crazy has happened in terms of a change to the roster. The oversimplified answer I have here is that this is just the roster. And are Kopp and Rasmussen so important in their individual play where when they leave a team's roster, this is what happens? I think they have some importance that is underappreciated by the fan base, but I think just as much, or if not more, this is a house of cards situation, like I've mentioned in the past, where they were 2 cogs of some importance in varying degrees, Kopp being the second line center, the more important one, that were holding up a big, delicate balance where this roster doesn't have a lot of configurations where they can be effective. even in the change of the Todd McLellan Detroit Red Wings to the Derek Lalonde Detroit Red Wings, if you look backwards, like what Todd McLellan was doing differently, he didn't magically create better players. He was using them differently, yes. You look at Marco Kasper, but also like they were volume shooters. They weren't volume high danger shooters all of a sudden. You look at whatever expected goal metric or you just watch the game, they'll tell you the same thing. The Red Wings get more chances and they were prioritizing getting more chances, but they weren't getting more quality chances because they don't have more high-end players. And they were still, like you said, Brad, being carried by their best players who right now are cold. They're being carried by the power play. They were being carried by the goalies mostly doing pretty well there for a stretch. And all those things going away at once at the worst time of the season, which seems to be a tradition in Detroit, that's what's leading to this. So is this an excuse? No, because this is the Red Wings as they are configured now, disappearing at the worst time. But at the same time, you look at the roster, this kind of just is what you have until the next kind of phase of this team, which I don't think is crazy to say starts next year, depending on who makes it and what the outcome is for guys like Sandin Pellikka or if Yzerman makes a big signing or a trade. But it could turn around again. They could go on a little heater here. They could, get up to a 600 points percentage for a decent stretch. The wild card race is very tight where you're not ruling the Red Wings out, but they're not trending in the right direction and nothing is like, no one's sitting here saying, yeah, you're predicting a loss for all of these games that they're losing. But the way they're losing, it was bound to happen at some point. It sucks that it's all happening at once. And the Red Wings still have to prioritize this season, finding a way and it's gut check time. And we talk big picture of the rebuild. Yeah, like it's just the roster. This season though, like I agree with you. I don't blame fans for being frustrated. This team has to find a way to extract the most of what they can. If they lose and it's just that Carolina is the way better team, that's fine. But they need to find a way to up the effort here and stop the preventable mistakes because that's what's part of what's killing them.
Last year, the March meltdown, they had the excuse of Larkin was hurt for a big chunk of it. He's their heart, the soul, the captain. Okay. This year, there's no excuse. If your excuse is Andrew Kopp and Michael Rasmussen are out, who have combined for less than 20 goals this year, we can't overcome that. You don't deserve to be in the race, let alone make the playoffs. There's a million reasons you can sit here and go, well, Larkin and Raymond are emotionally and physically exhausted because they didn't get the Four Nations face-off break. Understandable. Look at how many teams are scorching hot after the Four Nations face-off, and they had more players in that tournament than the Red Wings did. Lucas Raymond didn't even have to play the final game. Again, both great players, both acceptable to have a slump. I'm not sitting here and burying these guys because they have been getting ripped on the hardest by the fan base, which again isn't fair to me. Everybody has said they're going to hit a cold streak at some point this year. What's the rest of the roster going to do? Tarasenko, Berggren, Veleno, Fischer. They've done nothing. That's the problem. Now, last year, this problem ran all of March. This is only 3 games. Yeah, 3 pretty critical games, but only 3 games. They have the capability to pull themselves out of this. Is it going to be easy? No. This is the NHL. It's never going to be easy. Tampa's on a heater right now. Is every game easy for them? No. How many players did they have at the Four Nations? Damn near their whole roster, it feels like.
Plus a coach.
And they are red hot right now. This is a hard league. It's this, when we talk about, GMs don't make trades because it's hard. Everybody yells BS. It's your job. It's supposed to be hard. The players, this applies to them as well. Yeah. They have a lot of things to overcome right now. Probably a bunch of injuries going around the room. A lot of fatigue. A lot of frustration. I say this with the full sympathy in the world, but tough shit. This is why you get paid millions of dollars. Step up. If this is the 3rd year in a row they had it within their grasp and they themselves pissed it away due to poor performance, this group deserves to get ripped at the end of the year. Yeah, at the beginning of the year, most people expected them to miss the playoffs, including us. And if they're sitting here April 15th and they miss the playoffs, well, you can have one of two reactions. Did they fight, scratch, and claw and almost get in? Or did they wilt in March like they did last year? Because there will be two very different conversations depending how this goes.
Well, quick game recap in a second, but I agree. I think the minor part where I differ is I really do believe that like this is just a natural ebb and flow of how this roster as it's constructed was always going to happen. But where I agree completely is that even if you don't make it in, there's something to be said about a team that has the fight that you need at this point in a long season to get in, and you need to learn how to do that. You need to learn how to win. Now, the big part of this is still, like, it's Todd McLellan's team, yes, but this isn't really fully his team yet. He hasn't had a full offseason, training camp, preseason, everything. And that's part of the mentality that he brings. So, yeah, we'll see what he can do with the team this year, but it's an iterative process. You can't just be doing the same thing every time. So I agree. Tough questions do need to be asked, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they're not completely fair. That's just the way the NHL goes. So the game ended up 2-1. Just quickly, Jordan Martin scored the first goal. Every player on the ice, from Kane to Seider to Chiarot, played that poorly, and then Lyon let in what I thought was a weak goal. The second goal was Jordan Staal on a wraparound where Lyon just whiffed on the puck, made a mistake, went around the net the wrong way, got beat on a wraparound. Dumb. And then, funny enough, he was the best Red Wing after that for the rest of the game.
Playing guilty is a performance enhancer.
Elmer Soderblom had a beautiful individual effort, wheeled around the outside, generated space for himself. Orlov looked terrible on that play.
Yeah, but what's Dmitry Orlov? 6'2"? He's tiny. He's not stopping that.
Gets burned, and then Soderblom makes no mistake, shows off his hands, and that was legitimately the only shining moment for the Red Wings.
Someone's got to make a play.
Yeah. Other notable plays, another blatant high stick missed on, it was accidental. Rantanen was just turning at the same time as Larkin. I cannot believe the amount of arguments, and I'm not relitigating that here. It was an accidental high stick. It's not why Detroit lost. It's just funny that the refs missed it again. Dave Jackson, ESPN rules analyst, on Twitter was like, that's a penalty. They just missed it. The amount of arguments about that, I'm like, no, what's with this whole waist height? But no, that is the most obvious penalty.
The high sticking rule is exceptionally simple. I can explain it in 5 seconds. If it's not a follow through on a shot and you hit a player in the face with the stick, it's a penalty. Full stop. Doesn't matter if it's intentional. Doesn't matter if it's, you're swinging it wildly or you're just skating by someone. Yeah, there's some nuance where if the player's on his knees and okay, fine. But like high, think of the literal definition of that word, stick.
Yeah.
Okay? Like not rocket science.
End of the game, there's just kind of a collision play between Staal and Raymond. Raymond catches an arm to the side of the head. Just caught him funny, I think. Shook him up. There's a big scrum after. Raymond seems okay. Nothing really else to come of it. And that's the game. So upcoming, the Red Wings have the Utahs on Thursday in Detroit again, which will be planned Carter Mazur's NHL debut. And then on the 7th, on the road, the Washington Capitals. But that's 4 hours after the NHL trade deadline. So after the Utah game, that's the last game before the deadline. So we'll see how that goes.
I just want quick little gripe. Having games the day of the trade deadline is arguably the stupidest thing the NHL does in a sea of stupid things, as you were.
I can't stand it, although I will say in a year where you had 4 nations or a year where you have the World Cup or the Olympics, you can't be just giving away days left, right, and center. So that I get, but I agree. It's drives you nuts. So the Red Wings, by the end of the game, had completely switched up their lines, and it was reported today by our good friend Max Bultman that the practice lines actually looked a lot like how Detroit finished that game. Soderblom getting top pair treatment with Larkin and Raymond, Kasper between Berggren and Tarasenko, Compher with Kane and DeBrincat and Rasmussen, who I think is cleared for Thursday.
I did believe I saw that.
Skating between a rotation of Veleno, Fischer, and Mott. Fischer has been waived since the start of the day to now. That isn't directly related to the call-up of Carter Mazur. We'll talk about that in a second, but where is Carter Mazur going to fit in? Because Carter Mazur who has been on a fantastic streak since returning to the Grand Rapids Griffins. That team has struggled, but he's been doing really great for them. I think he's on a 6-game point streak or so, 7 points in that time. He's been great, and he missed a good amount of time with that upper body injury, and not a year where you want to miss that time. He wanted to continue to strengthen and bulk up. So to see him scorching hot is a huge relief. And we were kind of talking about it, like, is this the right time to call him up? Is he going to be able to take the physicality? And I think Steve Yzerman and Todd McLellan sees that this team needs a spark. And I'm excited to see what Carter Mazur can do. And honestly, pumped for the kid.
Oh, yeah. The first thought for sure is just so happy for him. Like, he's went through a lot, 3rd-round pick, and even was considered a reach at the time. Now, here he is after, hopefully, what's concluding a successful AHL career, and he's just an NHLer now. Not likely, I know. Just the way the season's going and when guys get healthy. But, yeah, you hope he comes in. And I don't think he's going to play a huge role. They're probably going to ease him into it, especially when you've already got Soderblom on the top line and Kasper anchoring his own line. There's probably not a lot of room in the top 9 for another rookie right now. I get that. So he probably plugs in on the 4th line. He'll play his minutes and dip his toes in the water. But there's a small point on this one to a bigger point where we need some optimism. One, I love that the Red Wings go on a 3-game pisser and Yzerman just drops a hand grenade in the room. Guys, we're in a playoff race. Not acceptable. Not scared to make a change. Everybody loves Christian Fischer. Fans love him. Teammates love him. We love him. He's been invisible all year. He has not been a factor on the ice. Listen, I don't think Carter Mazur is going to come in and light the world on fire. I think he's like, if he comes in and he doesn't look out of place, even if he doesn't put up any points, that's a win. But this is the brass saying, we think a rookie might do more than some of the guys on this roster, and we're willing to find out, which in previous years hasn't always been the case. Now you look at this roster, you've got Soderblom on the top line, previously Kasper. You've got Kasper anchoring the 3rd line right now. And now you've got potentially another rookie going in on the 4th line. They're not scared of the youth movement, which is a relief, because now, even if this season doesn't go the way we want it playoff-wise, they are building to the future. And like every game these guys play in whatever role, it's building to the future. Like, that's a double win, because now it's sending a shot into the room to hopefully wake some guys up, because like you said with the game, a lot of guys looked, I'm not going to say sleepy, but effort levels could be better. And there's still an eye to the future. Soderblom could be a piece for the future. Kasper's a piece for the future. Mazur's a piece for the future. Edvinsson and Johansson are still playing big role. Every shift they take only helps next season and the season after. So, yeah, this, obviously you're happy for Carter. I'm happy the brass isn't scared. And I'm happy that even if this year doesn't go the way we want, at least there's positive to figuring out who's going to fit in where for the future.
Yeah, any concerns from Todd McLellan teams of old where you're like, what's he going to do with the kids? That is firmly out the window. And that's part of not just something that he's embraced, kind of. It is part of the core ethos of how this team has to move forward, which fully agree with you, Brad. What is Carter Mazur going to bring to the ice? I think he is like a bulldog in every sense of the word, and not one that is just like a crasher and a burner and a grinder. Like, he has offense to his game. Again, we always joke, he said on the show, I don't want to be the next Tyler Bertuzzi. But there are elements of Tyler Bertuzzi's game, if you remember it, where Tyler Bertuzzi was a thorn. He was a nail to play against, but he was offensively gifted. Now, Tyler Bertuzzi lacked structure, to put it lightly, and I think the joke was he always came back to the bench with snow on his pants because he constantly was falling over. So that the comparison ends pretty soon there. But in general, like, Carter Mazur is probably the guy that you want from Grand Rapids if you want someone to come in and give a spark to this team. That's what has to be part of the Red Wings' depth in the future. Guys who can play with the intensity and the physicality and the energy bringing that the modern NHL needs in depth roles, but you still need to be able to produce. And that's what the Red Wings are hoping that they see, obviously long-term with Carter, but I am curious to see what he can come in and do. Mind you, he'll tell you he feels like his job is to be a professional eater besides a professional NHL player. He doesn't come naturally with a massive filled-out frame. It's going to take time for him to build that, man strength, man frame. But he's on his way, and that strength will come with time, and I'm pumped to see what the kid can do to start.
Yeah, and like I said, expectations are low, relatively speaking, because again, he's a rookie coming into the middle of a playoff race. But again, McLellan and Yzerman got to be thinking, is he going to be any worse than what, I'll be fair and give like more offensive guys, Berggren and Tarasenko have been doing lately? There's no chance. Because they've been doing nothing.
Veleno, Fischer, like
Tarasenko's been shockingly bad.
I'm done. I get they're auditioning him, but Tarasenko out there that much and Tarasenko out with the net pulled, it's terrible. It is so bad.
If he's not traded by the deadline, there's no chance he's not getting bought out in the summer. Like, my God. Is Mazur gonna...
Sorry, I mean, it's so bad how good he is. Other GMs.
I can't believe it. Recent Stanley Cup winner, Vladimir Tarasenko.
Please.
Man, I love the guy, but he's cooked.
It's not the same guy.
It's not the Vlad we know and love. But again, there's just so many passengers on this team that I find myself going back to my, I don't even know what to call it, primate brain from the throes of the rebuild, where it's like, just play the rookies. It can't be worse.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at a lot of parts of the lineup and going, play them, it can't be worse. Which, to say that in the middle of a playoff race is not great. But again, circling back to the optimism,
that's what they're doing.
I love that they're willing to do it.
And with Fischer being waived, noted before the show, there's not a roster crunch. Like, that wasn't a corresponding move to Mazur being called up or anything. There's a lot of complicated stuff to do with LTIR and guys who the Red Wings have who could be on LTIR but aren't, and it has to do with accrual of cap space all the way up till the deadline. So we'll see how all that plays out. It could be a lot of different things. Maybe, if you want to get wild, maybe Yzerman's cooking up something huge and every dollar matters. Whatever it is, we'll see how it pans out. In the end, though, like you said, you love Fish. Unreal vibes guy. The room loves him. Teams and fans and everything love him wherever he goes, but he's just been one of those guys who've not been effective for the Red Wings. So there's not really anything to be said about him being waived.
He might not even get sent down if he clears.
Yeah.
Right? It might just be to have that 30-day flexibility window like you talked about if they need it.
Okay. That's what has happened for the Red Wings. That's what's coming for the Red Wings. We'll see what happens over these next two games. We'll be talking to you maybe on Sunday. Sunday's the plan, March 9th, unless things go crazy with the trade deadline for the Red Wings, in which case there will be a Friday evening emergency episode, trade deadline episode. So we'll see. But at the very least, we'll be talking to you Sunday after the next two games. We're going to be back for our trade deadline preview, but first, a word from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. Losing your hair is frustrating, but just because it's happening doesn't mean you have to accept it. If you've been noticing your hairline creeping back in your team photo or things feeling thinner under your helmet, you can do something about it. That's where Hims comes in. Hims provides you with convenient and quality access to a range of hair loss treatments that work. Choose from personalized, chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatments to find out what works best for you. Best part? The entire process is 100% online, meaning no awkward doctor visits, just real results from the comfort of your couch. Just answer a few quick questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is shipped directly to your door for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything, from treatments to ongoing care. And right now, you can take the first step toward thicker, fuller hair. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/wingedwheel. That's HIMS.com/wingedwheel for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/wingedwheel. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Welcome back. The trade deadline and the Detroit Red Wings gave us not a full meal, but a little something to kick us off. The trade deadline again is Friday, March 7th, 3 p.m. Eastern. trades have to be submitted by then. We might still hear about them a little bit after that, depending on how many things are going into the hopper. You'll hear that word a lot right at the deadline, but 3 p.m. is when the NHL teams have to submit their trades to Central Registry Eastern Time. Now, what the Red Wings did today, I speculated on a recent episode, they have a ton of cap space and there's a lot of things they could do. And even though they're not necessarily a tanking team, well, if you don't really have plans for that cap space, why not use it to facilitate a deal? And that's exactly what happened. Tampa Bay and Seattle had a pretty surprising trade today where Tampa Bay acquired Nygard, familiar, and Oliver Bjorkstrand from Seattle. There's other pieces in there from Seattle for essentially Yzerman and 2 first-round picks, both top 10 protected, 26 and 27. So not this year, but in 2026 and in 2027, a second-round pick this year, and there's retention and everything in there. So how did all that work? Well, the Red Wings came into play, and they retained on 25% of Nygard's contract, which turns out to be roughly $1.29 million of his final year. And they get a 4th-round pick that's conditional. And the condition is it's whichever one of Tampa Bay's 4th-round pick this year and the Edmonton Oilers' 4th-round pick this year is better. And that's the one that Detroit receives from Tampa Bay. So all in all, Tampa Bay, Detroit also shipped out Kyle O'Coin, a late-round pick who is in the NCAA for Detroit. That's just moving a contract. That wasn't it. Like, there's no value there.
It's opening a contract slot. I think I even saw somewhere his rights might be expiring soon.
Yeah,
which doesn't even matter. He's a non-factor. But yeah, this was essentially they ate 1.29 million cap, and given how deep in the season is, it's not even that straightforward. And it's only like 300 and something thousand in cash.
Yeah.
So Chris Ilitch, if you're listening, that's what you're cutting a check for. And they get a 4th-round pick. For all intents and purposes, it's a free asset.
Yeah,
right?
If you have the opportunity to do it, then you do it. And it's not like they're Chicago here where they, took something for way less value than they should have. I think Puckpedia put out that the average for this kind of retention is actually a 5th. So they did just a touch better than what market rates say. So is this going to change the game? No. Is this going to turn into anything? Well, I mean, if they do the Amadeus Lombardi thing again, then sure. But it's a 4th-round pick that you didn't have. You can flip it in another trade. You can use it. There's no downside to this. It's not like it's massive upside, but it's just one of those things that you do if you have the chance.
That's the part I can't wrap my head around, why people were so angry on the internet today about this.
Hold on. Just think about what you just said.
Generally, I understand why people are angry on the internet. There's lots of reasons to be angry on the internet, Ryan.
Yeah, you exist on it.
Getting a 4th-round pick because Chris Ilitch is willing to cut a check. Like, what's the downside here? Yeah, it's only a 4th-round pick. Nobody's saying it's a big asset. Very, very small asset. Amadeus Lombardi was a 4th-round pick for those who didn't catch on to what Ryan did there. You can get value in a 4th-round pick. You can flip it. You can use it for a rental. You can use it as filler in a bigger trade. The running joke in almost every group chat I'm in. It's not a trade until a conditional 4th-round pick is included.
That's right. That's how you get Connor McDavid or Mikko Rantanen.
Exactly. And hey, yeah, it eats up a little bit of the Red Wings cap space that they had available. They were not using it all.
They still have, what, $13 million in deadline cap space?
Who are they acquiring at the deadline that's going to max that out for them? I would like them to retain on 2 more contracts, and they probably still will have room to do whatever the hell they want to do, if they're even going to do anything. This is a free asset. It's not a big asset, but it's free. And unless you are deeply concerned about Chris Ilitch's savings account, there's really nothing here anybody should be upset about. And also, I've seen a bit of, why are you helping a division rival? Guys, I appreciate the optimism. I don't think Detroit and Tampa are overlapping in any ways that are going to be meaningful to either team this year.
Yeah, there's a hot second there where it looked like it, but they're not shopping at the same grocery store right now.
No, they are absolutely not. So yeah, typically you don't want to help out a division rival, but I don't think it's going to affect these two in fortunes with each other in either way.
So they actually now have a full set of picks again for this upcoming draft because they didn't have a 4th-round pick before. They had 2 third-round picks, but still. Now,
The big thing for there is for our live stream. Oh, when the Red Wings don't have a pick in a round, does that get tedious for a hot minute?
Yeah.
Having a pick in every round is clutch for us.
Yeah. Now, one day, Brad, they're going to do like the Vegas thing where you're not going to have a pick for like 5 more years in the first round. And that's going to be a blessing because you're going to be competing for the cup. All that aside, the Red Wings still have essentially the same situation they had before. A world of cap space. The number is so big, it doesn't effectively matter. You can do whatever you want. And they have a situation where there's not really a lot of justification based on how the team is configured right now to buy rentals, unless you think those guys could be signed for the medium term. And you have both medium and long-term needs. You've seen that this team can get to a point where they can win hockey games to put themselves in the wild card mix. So even if a guy's not useful, for 6 years from now, if he's useful for the next 3 years, I think the Red Wings are now in the conversation where you start to look at those guys to see if they can help this team along. We just got done talking about how do you learn how to win in March so you can even get to April and May. Those guys might help. That said, this is looking like a bit of a seller's market right now and premiums are being paid. So for the Red Wings, what do you do? What's realistic in your mind in terms of predictions, your preferences, specific moves, guys you want to target to move out or bring in? What's in front of Steve Yzerman that you think is a realistic option? And we don't have Evan here for our fence-sitting answer. I could mock it if you want. Oh, I don't know. For me,
yeah, they could go big or they might do nothing.
The thing is, it could go either way, Poor guy. Anyways.
What do I think's going to happen? I'll start there. Nobody's going to like this answer. I don't think much is going to happen. I think there's going to be a very quiet deadline for the Red Wings. They are not in a position to go for any, what I'll call with air quotations, good rentals, your rentals that cost you a first or a second round pick. I could see a depth defenseman, a depth center, the type of rentals that cost you a third or fourth round pick. That type of market, I could see some value in. Olli Maatta cost a third round pick if you're looking for a player comp in terms of the level of talent you can expect.
Congrats to him on his 3-year contract, by the way.
Super happy for him. That's, I think, the rental market the Red Wings could dabble in. I think they would love to unload Tarasenko if they could. I think they would love to unload Hall if they could. I don't think either of those things is likely to happen. I think the Red Wings are going to be kicking tires, to steal a Ken Holland phrase, on some pretty big names. I think they probably would still be sniffing around at Dylan Cousins, players like that where they're young, term, would cost a lot, but like you alluded to, you're not looking at a 1-2 year solution to anything here. This would then be a part of your future. Do those trades typically happen at the deadline? Not often. Those are usually off-season trades, but you're not doing your due diligence if you're not picking up the phone. And I think Yzerman's going to be picking up the phone. So I think ultimately, if Yzerman can unload a contract, if he can acquire a decent depth rental, that's probably a successful deadline. I know it's not sexy. I know it's not exciting. But again, they're a fringe playoff team who, statistically speaking, are more likely to miss the playoffs than make it right now. That's even if they go out and acquire a quote-unquote good rental. It's hard to invest too much futures into that scenario. And I understand we're sick of this. Believe me, I hate that I'm saying this. But to be a good GM, you have to take emotion out of it. Emotionally, I want them to go trade for Rantanen. I want them to go trade for Mitch Marner. I want them to go all in. I'm sick of this. But when you take emotion out of it, what's the cold hard reality? A team that is unlikely to make the playoffs, though still possible before you all start yelling at me, that is not a team that goes out and pays premiums for short-term solutions. Again, if a Cousins, a Byram, a long-term solution presents itself in trade, absolutely. But also the Red Wings, yeah, they're in a pretty good cap situation, but it doesn't mean it couldn't be better. So if someone is willing to take a Tarasenko or a Hall or whoever, you got to sell a little bit just because. And again, if we're pulling those guys off the roster, are the Red Wings any better? Yeah, they probably are. Addition by subtraction at this point. So I think it's going to be quiet, but I still think Yzerman's going to be effective in terms of actually helping this team in the ways that it matters.
Now, here's what I've been hearing. What we've been hearing all year, really, but especially of the last, 3 months or so. We all know the Dylan Cousins story where Detroit and Buffalo were flirting for a long time there. That's real. That's well documented. That's real. There was a point where I was talking to you guys and I was like, hey, based on what I have, this might be happening soon. And that notion was out there with other people as well. Like, it seemed like that was going to happen with Detroit. For one reason or another, I don't know this for sure, but the sense I get is that Buffalo froze and that they don't really know. I don't know whether it's a non-confidence in the GM to make any big moves. I don't know whether the GM lacks the confidence to make any big moves or he just didn't want to panic. But for one reason or another, it hasn't happened. I don't know that it's completely off the table, but to me, it would come up kind of out of nowhere if it came up again. But there's just such a track record of it. And in the NHL, when these things happen, they often happen fast, right? Like you just circle back with something and it picks up out of nowhere. So you never know. I wouldn't be surprised about the interest in Byram, but the sense I get is that Yzerman has been on calls for most of the big names that have either been traded or were available. And that's not necessarily news in terms of like every guy gets calls. If he's of any value, usually 2/3 of the league are calling just to see. But you hear a little bit more this year. I heard a bit more of who Yzerman was interested in, and they were the kind of big names that he wouldn't really have gone for in the past because the timeline wasn't perfect or the team was so far away. So it's not a zero chance that something big happens. But if it hasn't happened up until now, I just wonder if this isn't more likely to be an off-season thing because you also have unrestricted free agents potentially in the off-season. If Mikko Rantanen gets traded again, well, he hasn't been keen to sign in Carolina, which is why they're talking about trading him again. Is he going to be keen to sign in Detroit or wherever else he goes? Probably wants to take his time, go to the summer, see what the market is, breathe a little bit. The guy got traded off a franchise he wanted to retire with. He's still shaken up by that. You don't know what's going to happen with Mitch Marner. You don't know what's going to happen with other, big names. And so it stands to reason that the offseason is just as big of a time where Yzerman can see what else he can add, maybe without giving up assets. All of that said, I think anybody who has even a medium-term appreciable benefit to this team, he's exploring. But like you said, Brad, for all those reasons, it's just not terribly likely. I would like to see, and I think the focus is probably on how do you make it so that you have fewer, contracts that are automatic buyouts. Because if you can get rid of one of Tarasenko or Hall or call it Gustafsson, whoever, that's great. If you can get rid of two, that's awesome. You buy out the other. To me, it's less about cap space next season. It's more about roster spots. And I'm sorry, with Tarasenko, it's just didn't work with Lyon, hasn't worked with McLellan. Barring something miraculous happening, it's just not working. With Hall, you have those moments where he looks fine, and we, at the beginning of the season, we're like, we're going to embrace this while it's here because it might go, and it's gone, and it's just not playable right now with him at that position, and that's in a depth role. And Gustafsson, the best of Gustafsson is what have we seen? Invisible, where you just don't notice him, maybe contribute a little bit on the power play, but other than that, you need to move out those guys. Addition by subtraction, fully agree. So my prediction is one of those goes. Nothing big happens because it's the NHL, and maybe you facilitate another trade, but I wouldn't be too surprised if something bigger happens. Cousins is still there. You never know.
Yeah, there's enough out there that it's okay to have some hope for some excitement. I don't see a lot of viable options, which is probably the biggest sticking point. After recent incidents, I don't think Zegras would be an option anymore. But Yeah, you got Cousins, you got Byram, both filled direct needs. Buffalo.
I don't think they would not trade for Zegras for that reason.
No, I don't think they'd trade for Zegras because he couldn't be any less of an Yzerman type.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? The fact that he threw a dirty hit probably helped him get traded to Detroit because they're like, oh, he has a mean streak.
Yeah, but they were probably a little bit annoyed that it was Rasmussen.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I look around the league and you look at the teams that are being aggressive and who's out there, and I see the Red Wings picking up the phone, but I just don't see them being the favorites to land any of those guys because you got to think the contenders would be more aggressive, willing to pay more. And it makes more sense too, right? So, I don't know. It's like outside of the Buffalo guys, I'm struggling to find a name that really makes a lot of sense for Detroit that is actively out there.
There are the people who are pushing for like the depth defensemen, like the Connor Murphys, or people who are pushing for the Ryan Donato's or Ricard Raquel's. And I actually can see a benefit to that. Ricard Raquel especially is intriguing. The age kind of scares you a bit, but you know, if you need one of those like transition guys who's not just a passenger, that one could help you out a bit. I would actually be really interested in that one, just to put that out there. But the price is going to be high in this market, though.
That's the issue. I don't see Raquel getting dealt without a first going back, and I just don't think the Red Wings are in a position they can move their firsts yet, barring like a star level player, which Raquel's great. He's not a star.
What do you do if there's like a Casey Middlestat available cheap?
I think the Red Wings are very much in a position where they can explore some depth reclamation projects. He plays center. It's an issue right now. Can't be worse than the guys they're parading out now.
He's a UFA in 2027, so there's some term there available. Yeah. It's $5.75 million, so not cheap, but as the cap goes up,
it's not crazy. Yeah. I look at who would they replace on the roster in terms of role relative to cost. That's basically Compher. Am I confident that he would be better than what Compher's providing right now? Yeah, pretty confident he would. So I'd explore it. Again, cheap, because now instead of having one near $6 million JT Compher, you have two, which isn't great, but you hope for the upgrade to make it worthwhile, right? And we've seen Casey Middlestat's offensive upside. It's real. We just don't know why it disappears from time to time.
And especially on Colorado. You're like, why?
Don't get me wrong. There's red flags. That's not a surefire slam dunk. You do the trade, but you explore it.
Okay. Rest of the league, because the Red Wings' tale has been told. And I mean, maybe they surprise and they sign Rantanen and it's an effective sign and trade, or a trade then sign.
Actually, do you know who would make a lot of sense for Colorado to take in return in a Casey Middlestat trade? Noted player who's had a lot of success in Colorado.
Oh, yeah. You know what? They wouldn't hate that.
JT Compher.
Whoa. They know him. He like him.
Great for them.
He stepped in big moments for them when they had key injuries, and he was up the lineup.
They have depth issues right now.
Middlestat's not working for them.
Compher's not working for us. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
There's a little bit of, like, Colorado's not dumb. They would say, like, you have to, like, the age difference here and the production you would have to add, but.
Would you, though? What you gain in Middlestat's offense, you lose in Compher's defense. Right? I don't think that's a crazy trade. Compher's contract's 1 year longer, right?
Compher's contract ends in 2028, yeah, and
I think
Middlestat's is 2027.
I think even if it's a slight drop off player wise, the one less year on the contract's beneficial to the Red Wings. Meanwhile, Colorado's in their window, so they probably don't really care. So, yeah, I'm curious. I think there's a base there that actually makes a lot of sense for both teams.
Huh. Okay, elsewhere in the NHL, the trades that happened. Actually, the other part of the Seattle trade, Tampa going all out to get Gourde and Bjorkstrand. Honestly, 2 first-round picks, absolutely. That's a big price to pay. You have a little bit of term with Bjorkstrand. You have an expiring contract with Gourde. I thought it was Tampa saying, yeah, look, if we're on our way out, then let's take another crack at this. And as time goes on, and we've lived through this Red Wings rebuild for so long, I think the biggest mistake people make when analyzing NHL teams are like, this is their window, and when they're moving out of it, they're dumb to not rebuild right away. Rebuilds suck. They're hard. The way the NHL is designed and how long it takes for draft picks to be impactful on your team, by and large, makes it difficult to get out of them. The salary cap has made it hard. Pro scouting and amateur scouting is not good across the board. There's no guarantee that a rebuild will turn into a good team. It is incredibly hard to do, even if you're talented. So if you have a waning window, borrow from the future to keep it open. I'm fully on that train, especially if you have a world-class goaltender like Vasilevsky. And if Andrei Vasilevsky is, at 75% of his game, he's one of the best in the world. And when he's at the top of his game, I think he is the best in the world. So go all out. I think that's the right move for Tampa.
No, 100%. I agree fully. And again, Tampa's first round picks are not Detroit's first round picks, are not San Jose's first round picks. The difference between what Detroit's could be 14th overall versus Tampa's 26th is the Grand Canyon in terms of value and what you're likely to get there. So yeah, it's perfectly okay. And I think Bjorkstrand's a lot better than I think people give him credit for. He's played in Columbus and Seattle. I think he's got lost in the mix a little bit. He's a dude. Like, that's a guy.
Yeah, he's a quality player, and they same as Colorado. They lack the depth. That's what they've struggled with. So good for them for figuring that one out. We'll see how it goes. If they go out early, then they'll regret it. But at the same time, you're here to win the cup, and once you do it once, you especially know you're just here to win the cup, man.
And it's not a strong Eastern Conference like we've seen in previous years. Like, how many legit contenders are in the East right now? Florida, we'll call Tampa now.
Toronto, if you believe in Toronto,
yeah.
But do you?
Carolina, maybe. Are you buying Washington? I'm not all the way there yet.
I know some people do, some people don't. I buy Washington. I also buy Carolina. I think, but none of them are like
New Jersey. Jack Hughes is out for the year.
Yep.
Nobody's buying them.
Actually, they're, I think, big contender to bring in Rantanen.
Okay, well, then that just adds New Jersey into the mix and takes Carolina out of it.
Yeah, still.
Like, the East is as weak as it's been in a while. So, yeah, I understand any team at the top of it right now going all in. Like, the Florida thing with Seth Jones, that wasn't a good trade for him. That was a terrible trade for him, but he makes them better in the short term. That's all they care about.
If they don't have Matthew Tkachuk back for the playoffs, then
hurts.
they're in trouble. If they do, then they're probably pretty happy because they've arrested Matthew Tkachuk.
Absolutely.
The Florida Panthers, this isn't a massive trade. Vitek Vanacek for Patrick Giles. The only reason I note that is because I thought Florida might be one of the teams calling on one of Detroit's goalies. Trent Frederick goes to the Edmonton Oilers in a three-way deal with retention and everything. The Oilers are looking for things that they let go this offseason in offer sheets.
I know the tweet you're referencing, and I died laughing. Hey, the Oilers could use a speedy forward and a well-rounded defenseman who can play both sides, and someone just put up pictures of Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. That organization is so poorly run. It pisses me off every day to knowing that they got McDavid and Draisaitl because just wasted.
Well, they're constantly paying for the sins of previous
GMs, I agree.
Right? Like Chiarelli and then Holland with Wright, and it was... Yeah, you could have had a lot of things solved. I still don't know what goaltending.
Yeah, I like this trade for them, though. Like, they didn't give up any premiums to get two, because that Max Jones came in the trade as well. So it's like, yeah, you got two decent depth forwards should play their role nicely, because Jeff Skinner hasn't worked out. Victor Arvidsson hasn't worked out.
Which I'm shocked by. Those seem like such shrewd signings to me.
How? But either way, I guess when everything else you do doesn't work, keep trying.
Yeah. Other big names that are out there, you look at the Brock Nelsons of the league. You look at, I don't know if you think someone like Carson Soucy is going to move. We talked about Raquel, Brock Besser. Actually, Brock Besser is the last name I want to talk about for the Red Wings. I don't know necessarily for a trade that he makes a ton of sense unless you think he'll sign as well. But Brock Besser's 28, and he's a guy who career average 30 goals. And it's not always like 30 bang on. Like, it's either a big year or a down year kind of thing, like 18 goals or 40 or whatever. I don't know. I always think back to when Brock Besser could have been had essentially just for his contract. Like you could have had him almost free because Vancouver needed the help. And I think a lot of teams are kicking themselves for not doing it. I'd be interested in Besser for the Red Wings.
Not in trade. So here's where I'm at with him as a free agent. So I think it was Friedman was reported the contract that he would want would be around 45 mil. So call it a 7x6 and change, something like that.
6.4. So yeah.
Yeah. Give or take, call it a mil from that point, just for argument's sake. I like Brock Besser as a player a lot, and you can never have too many goals. I'd be lying if I said the consistency doesn't scare me, because he's one of those players that goes in and out frequently. We've seen it with DeBrincat, and you love the heater, you get worried. I think he's in a lot of ways a poor man's DeBrincat from that standpoint, but he's closer to 30 than 25, combined with the consistency issues, combined with the Red Wings have a lot of these, like, I'm not going to call them one-dimensional shooters, but you know what I mean? Like him and DeBrincat versus Raymond versus even an MBN one day, and possibly Mazur. There could be a lot of redundancy there. Again, though, I'm of the mind you don't turn down too much talent. I just think for what he's going to cost more so on term than AAV, he doesn't strike me as the type of guy who's going to be running hot into his 30s. I got a bad feeling about it. The warning signs are there. I know he's a winger and the other guy's a center, but a lot of Elias Lindholm vibes there.
It's a scary. You're gonna hear from DJ Bean, like that one has not worked out.
Yeah, like I get the same kind of vibe where it's like they're not the super aggressive physical player. Yes, they have skill. Yes, they have offense, but you only really see it when they're playing off another super skilled offensive player. I don't know. I like Besser, but if those numbers are to be believed, what he's asking, that's probably a no for me.
I mean, you look at the way the cap's going up and those numbers aren't what they feel like still because we haven't adjusted the way we think about the cap. But I do agree, like, you don't want to just be throwing out, 6.5 to anyone at all times. If he's 28, I see like maybe 4 decent years in there. But if this down year in scoring is a trend and not just part of his ebb and flow, then I fully agree with you. And that's what part of the pro scouting process is what do you think it's going to be for him? But I do agree it's all of that combined makes it so making it a trade asset is probably not the ideal thing here. You would reevaluate in the summer if you're really interested, but I don't know. We'll see what Vancouver chooses to do. Ryan Donato, again, is another guy where like you look at him and you're like, yeah, maybe you're useful. He's having a great year with Chicago. Great high shooting percentage. So you worry about a regression to the mean there, but he scores and he produces 5-on-5, but he's a free agent this summer. So you see what you might be able to pick him up for then compared to what Chicago might be asking for. Okay. That is, it's a wide open year. The Red Wings aren't exactly poised to do a ton, but they're not guaranteed to do nothing. So it's a trade deadline preview in that there's nothing imminent. There's been a lot of flirtation, but nothing has really reached a fever pitch this year.
Things could happen. Other things might not happen. Nothing could happen.
And what I'll close with before we jump into our interview here is that the amount of noise this year has been substantial all year, relatively speaking. But the fact that it's been at that level for this long doesn't inspire me to think that, a ton is going to happen. So we'll see. I think, again, realistically, the best that we can hope for, not the best that we can hope for, but what I realistically hope for is that this rush to add depth for top teams, for example, inspires them to go pick up a Tarasenko or a Hall, and then the Red Wings free themselves of a small issue. Okay, let's jump into our conversation, our crossover with the What Chaos show featuring DJ Bean on this episode. And when we're back with you on the other side, our final segment of the Winged Wheel podcast. About time we had a What Chaos Winged Wheel podcast crossover. Long time in the works.
Needed it.
And this is DJ Bean of What Chaos. Thrilled to have you on. And DJ, pumped, honestly, to meet you in this conversation. Love the work that you do. But we were talking before, we actually had Pete on the show way back in the early days of the Winged Wheel podcast. And we just have a personal rule now in the show that we just take the taller of the two hosts of a show forever doing a crossover.
You know what? That makes sense. We are doing our 24-hour trade deadline stream on Thursday through Friday, which is when we just do a show that is 24 hours long, and it's horrible and it's a mess. We're incorporating dinosaurs into this one, and I did get Pete a Brontosaurus costume, so he can be the biggest of all of us for once.
Is he like his head's going to be at the chest and you have a periscope for him to see at the top? Or?
Honestly, that is what it's like. His real face is here, and then the Brontosaurus neck goes like above and up. So check that out. You can find that on the What Chaos YouTube.
Perfect. So What Chaos, you guys cover everything, but we were actually talking before you jumped on here. A natural starting point has to be everything happening in Boston. You guys are based out of Boston, obviously Boston Bruins fans, and you're in tune better than anyone else. So, I mean, today was the Trent Frederic trade, so why don't we start there? But is this the start of a slight teardown for the Bruins, or am I jumping the gun yet again?
No, it's a fair question to ask. The thing is, though, this would be happening with or without a teardown. Like, they weren't going to sign Frederic. They need to get something for their expiring players because they've drafted so poorly, and/or, as you learned a couple of years ago as a Red Wings fan, trade away their first-round picks as they did when they got Tyler Bertuzzi from the Wings. So they need to get things when they're losing things. So Frederic, that trade was probably always going to happen. An eventual Justin Brazeau trade, which I don't think is going to net them a ton, but that has to happen. The question then becomes, are they also going to trade the Brandon Carlos, the Charlie Coyles, the Morgan Geekies, and the Brad Marchands of the world? And I'll again repeat, Frederic, I don't think indicates necessarily that next batch necessarily goes. But they should be, like, at least in Carlos' case, I think they should do it. And I honestly, I would trade Marchand too. If he wanted to go, I'd let him make that call. But if he's willing to go, trade him. Offer him a bunch of money in the offseason, give him the chance to win, he deserves it, and then revisit in the offseason and pay him so he can get the best of both worlds.
What do you think was the catalyst for this? I know you just said like it could have been anything and they were going to do this no matter what, but McAvoy getting hurt at Four Nations must have really kind of just put a dagger in it, because the wildcard race is competitive, but the teams aren't unbeatable, right? Boston could have clawed their way back into it.
Yeah, and the McAvoy thing, I'm going to steal a take from my friend Megan Ottolini, who brought up that maybe the McAvoy thing is their excuse to say, look, this team was going to figure it out. The Minnesota doctors screwed everything up during Four Nations, not our fault, so now we have to sell, and you can't fire us because if those guys hadn't screwed it up, none of this would have happened. But now we got to trade all these guys, and now they go and do what they probably should be doing anyway. The new additions, the Nikita Zadorovs and the Elias Lindholms of the world, did not come in and make the impact that was anticipated. I expected them to be a worse regular season team this year anyway, solely because they had traded Linus Ullmark, and Jeremy Swayman obviously came in a little cold because he was unsigned for so long. He didn't hold out. He just didn't have a contract. I hate when people say hold out when the player's not holding out. It was the team. Anyway, there were reasons to think they would be worse in the regular season, and those things did happen. But additionally, Lindholm did not act as the number one center they thought he would be. Zadorov has been, I love the guy, but an absolute penalty machine, and this roster has just not gelled the way that they thought it would.
We actually talked about Zadorov on a recent show. The Red Wings, it's not like they get punked on every game, but there are games, for example, where Larkin and Middleton will go at it. And Larkin can hold his own, but you're like, my God, we've seen what happens when this team loses Dylan Larkin. We don't need this. Would it be worth taking a Nikita Zadorov off of the Boston Bruins' hands with retention? In your mind, what would that even cost? And would that be a mistake based on your inside perspective on how Zadorov has played? He's an all-time dude, and we need that vibe on the team in Detroit.
That's the thing. That he's a tough customer. He's going to piss a lot of people off, including your own fans. But I think the Bruins shouldn't trade him with retention just because, and I'm trying to double check his cap hit right now. I'm using Bing. What the hell's wrong with me? My computer's messed up.
He's got $5 million for 5 more years.
It's 5 times 6, right on the cut. Yes, right. So $5 million AAV in a couple of years is nothing. And he was signed to be, in a perfect world, they'd play him with like Charlie McAvoy on the first pairing, but realistically, he is a bottom 4 defenseman, second or third pairing. Even if he ends up becoming a clear-cut third pairing defenseman, $5 million AAV with the cap going up, when he'd also be there for his vibes and his rough customer-ness, that's not a horrible number. So I think that I don't think the Bruins are necessarily going to be running out of retention spots over the years, but I still would be careful with how I use them, especially for the next 5 years. So I think that if they trade him, they shouldn't retain, and I don't know who's going to want that without it retained.
So whenever a team is at all in a downturn, every other fan base does this incredibly annoying thing where they're like, well, let's just take their best players, right? Because that's what they're going to want to get rid of. Naturally, we partook in that. We're no better than anyone else. And we thought, how crazy is Boston willing to get? Is Pastrnak?
No. I mean, he is so clearly their best player at this point.
Yeah.
They're no longer where they were 6 years ago, where you could talk to 5 different Bruins fans, 5 different ones would tell you who their best player was, and all 5 of them were right. The person who said that Zdeno Chara is their best player is obviously right. The person who said that Patrice Bergeron is their best player is right. Person who said that Tuukka Rask is their best player is right. Person who says Brad Marchand is their best player is right. Person who says that David Pastrnak is their best player is right, etc., etc., etc. Right now, who's the best player on the Bruins? It is David Pastrnak. Cool. Who else? Nope. Conversation kind of over. Maybe Charlie McAvoy if he plays the way that he did in Four Nations, but he has not played the way that he played in Four Nations, and now he's hurt. So slim pickings right now for the Bruins, and I'll say this, on the idea of the fire sale potential with the Bruins, they don't have a lot of good forwards. So if they do trade Charlie Coyle, a Morgan Geekie, and not sign him, etc., they are kind of punting on next season too. So they have to be careful with what they move and what they'll be able to actually replace, because it is never the Bruins want, W-O-N-T, to be bad for multiple years in a row. If they sell, it's so they can be good next year. They'd have no designs on a long rebuild.
So that is a perfect lead-in. I knew the answer. Obviously, I have wishful thinking, like, maybe San Jose will just give up someone else Macklin Celebrini. Obviously not going to happen.
Ryan, ask every question. And I get so mad. We had this, Pete and I got in an argument last year. I brought up the Blackhawks should trade Seth Jones. And obviously fans want to trade him, but teams should be willing, if they're going to retain, they should be on him. And we got in an argument over, like, what's too ridiculous to bring up? What's too much of a pipe dream? And just throw, as long as there's no like hate speech in there, throw every thought out there. Throw every possibility out there. Ask every dumb question, because teams in the NHL aren't as creative as they should be. And when Florida does the move that they did a couple of days ago, you look at it and you're like, oh, that's kind of good for Florida. That's definitely kind of good for Chicago. So there's no thought. And I get the same thing whenever we bring up Sidney Crosby potentially getting traded, and Penguins fans are yelling at me about he's never getting traded. He took $8.7 million. Yeah, so it's more tradable. He has a smaller number, so it's more tradable, and he won't screw over whichever team he's getting traded to, and he makes it so if he does get traded, the team would give up more, and he'd leave the Penguins with a little something. Anything can happen. I'm not saying that everything will happen, but never apologize for asking an out there question, because the out there things do happen.
I mean, we saw Mikko Rantanen get traded pre-trade deadline in a year where Colorado wants to try to get the cup. So,
and he might get traded again.
So this whole keeping Pastrnak, I agree. Obviously, you want to keep him. The guys like that sometimes teams go 10, 20 years without seeing a player of his caliber. But keeping him is predicated upon the fact that you can do this retool on the fly, which is hard in the NHL. It's kind of a good time to do it because there's infinity cap space coming in. But Don Sweeney, what's the confidence from the fan base and from your guys' perspective in his ability to execute that? Because Boston's it's not been like universally bad, universally good, but there's been some moments in there where people have been scratching their heads.
I have never been a big fan of Don Sweeney, the general manager. Bruins fans are not at all fans of Don Sweeney, the general manager, which, I mean, usually fans don't like their general manager because their team is not celebrating a Stanley Cup win. Therefore, whose fault is it? Everybody but mine, kind of thing. I think that if the Bruins miss the playoffs, it would track with their history that the key decision makers would be dismissed. This happened at the end of the Peter Chiarelli regime, where all it took was him missing the playoffs once after going to 2 Stanley Cups in 3 years to be dismissed. Okay, Don Sweeney takes over. They miss the playoffs out of the gate. They're not going to fire GMs in back-to-back years, so he gets a little bit of a run. They get to say, hey, look, we're trying to fix Chiarelli's mess, and they have some really, really good teams. When things aren't going exactly how they want, they're given license to fire Bruce Cassidy, who it turns out is ready to win the Stanley Cup immediately. And that's what he does with the Vegas Golden Knights. If ever there were a time for the time to be up with Don Sweeney, it would be now if they miss the playoffs. So I wonder, do they do what they did with Chiarelli, where they at least tie one hand behind his back at the deadline and say, hey, you're not adding to save your job. You're not going to do anything risky here. You could do some stuff, but it's got to get the okay from us. Yeah, you can trade Trent Frederick. Or do they say, yeah, you know what? This is the Minnesota medical staff's fault. This isn't your fault. Go ahead, sell. You've got a job. And that would make Sweeney a lot more comfortable over the next 3 days, knowing that he's building something that he's going to be working on this summer and not somebody else.
Selfishly, I do hope for the drama because it's funny. And, you know, we need to see a shakeup in the Atlantic, period. Like, all the teams up top have been there forever. And I mean, I'm sorry I'm talking to you, and Boston seems to be the first one falling out. We pray for others' failure as well. Both of us can agree. We pray for the Leafs' failure, but
we pray for the Leafs' failure. I am on record as loving the Red Wings. I got my Red Wings little sticker here. I have a bunch of Red Wings stuff around here. I love the Red Wings, but I want so badly for the Sabres to be good. I'm very excited about the Canadiens, and that's the position that the Red Wings are in right now, where they have really walked through the muck and the mire step by step, slowly and building, and they've got the Raymonds and the Seiders, and the guys a little older, the Larkins and the DeBrinkets, and they are really rounding out and building something good at the same time that all these young players are hitting for the Canadiens. At some point, maybe the Senators are improving. The Sabres, at some point it has to happen, but I don't think any of us are holding our breath. But yeah, you are seeing teams come down on the other side of that. I think we all thought that Tampa would start to do that, swing and a miss by myself and anybody who thought that. But Boston certainly is at least opening the door for Detroit to get in. And I will say, as somebody who loved both teams that just participated in the Stadium Series, I hope they both get in. I want Columbus in, of course, and I want the Red Wings in.
Beautiful. I was just going to ask, because you guys were there. I mean, you saw the end of the game, kind of a shame of an ending of what was a pretty interesting game. But your take on, that event overall, and then you already started to talk about it. The Red Wings this year, who kind of surprised people after Derek Lalonde was fired and Todd McLellan came in.
Yeah, the event was awesome. We were at the Winter Classic as well, and that was stupid, would be the way to say it. It was just a stupid, sad kind of bummer of an event, and it sucks because so many awesome people were involved in it, and I want the Blackhawks to be able to smile once. They weren't able to do it on that day. Just a real bummer of an event. This event rocked. You had two teams, both in wild card spots, playing 2 games in a row against each other, knowing going into Saturday, and like I talked to some Blue Jackets players who are like, Red Wings can't be thrilled about that Thursday game. They're going to be coming on Saturday. And they did, I think. And I think they did a great test for a Blue Jackets team that's trying to make the playoffs is what does happen when you win game 1 of a series and the other team knows it can be better. Say what you want about the ending of that game. That's a good win for the Blue Jackets to, even with some potentially questionable officiating, be able to hold off a good team that just had like LOST lost a game and wanted to prove its mettle on the grand stage. And in my estimation, did. I thought the Red Wings played a good game on Saturday. That was a good road game for them in a tough, unique environment. I came away from that game being like, confirmed. I love both of these teams.
Yeah, it was, we talked about it. The Thursday game was terrible. Like for Detroit, it was just guys looked gassed after 4 nations. The defense was awful. The goaltending wasn't there. And I honestly think Detroit on balance played a much better game. They didn't get the 2 key saves from Talbot that they needed. They're pretty poor goals that were let in. But all in all, it did seem like 2 wild card caliber teams, right? Like they weren't perfect. They weren't top of the division teams, but they were going out there and trying to find a way to win. And one moment, one different, defensive decision from the Red Wings or decision from the officials, what have you. It was part of me is like, God, that important of a wild card game being outdoors just kills you. But it's the NHL couldn't be happier. And for 90,000 fans there, that was much better than, what the Blackhawks put up.
Yeah, our friend Greg Wyshynski is a proponent of playoff expansion, and this thought is just hitting me right now. If ever there were a case to be made for some sort of play-in where like a game 83 for the 8 and 9 teams to play each other or a 3-game series or something like that, isn't it what we saw the last 2 games that the Red Wings and Blue Jackets played against each other? And yes, one team won both of them, but you're telling me that those teams aren't evenly matched? You're telling me that if we considered that a 3-game series, we wouldn't say it absolutely rocked. And if you were a Red Wings fan, that you wouldn't think, oh man, like if we had them one more time, that ruled. I absolutely loved it. And you asked about just our thoughts on the Red Wings. I think they could use an improvement in goal. I think they could use depth down the middle. I think they could use another defenseman. And I think that they are kind of, I don't want to say like well-rounded with a lowercase w because they could use help everywhere. I think that they're still 1 year behind being taken seriously with a capital S, but I think they're a playoff caliber team right now. And what's interesting for them is how do they approach the trade deadline, knowing that they've got first-round picks in the next 3 years. They've got cap space. If they wanted to do things, they could. I think, though, that they're kind of like a stand patty type thing, maybe add a forward. What do you think?
These 2 Columbus losses, in a lot of people's minds, they draw back to a couple of years ago against the Ottawa Senators, where they just dunked on the Red Wings, and then the Red Wings traded Hronek and Bertuzzi, and that was it, right? To me, like, the losses matter, but they're still in a playoff position at the end. I don't really think it changes the calculus for Yzerman, and I think what will end up happening is what you said. The only thing that I wonder about is if Yzerman is able to close on one of these longer-term deals. He has been chasing guys like Cousins or, some bigger names over time, but it's the NHL. Like you said, they're too boring, the NHL, and the big deals don't happen. So if it's not at least in the medium-term interest for the team, I don't see him buying. In terms of selling, I don't think he's selling a piece just to sell. I think if he can move out a Tarasenko or a Hall, he'll do it. And anyone else, it would just have to be another GM calling and making an offer that he can't refuse, like what happened with Hronek back in the day. So all that adds up to probably, stand pat, not too much happening.
But this is an interesting year, Ryan, in that some of the guys that are on the trade block are younger players with term on their deal. That does not happen every year. So what about a Casey Middlestat or a Dylan Cousins?
Especially Cousins. Cousins was interesting when that one started to come around. I think My understanding is that the ball was in Buffalo's court and they just kind of froze because everyone was interested, right? I would be interested in Cousins. I think if your asking price, though, is based around a Kasper or a Danielson, that is when I start to pause because you're like, what's really the point? Because those guys could be Cousins. Middlestat, it's scary to me that it's not working in Colorado, right? Like, it's not like it's not working in Chicago. What's going wrong where it's not working out so well in Colorado? So if it's a cheap acquisition price, hell yeah, who cares about the cap space? But that's just not how it works. These guys aren't moved for cheap very often. Every team wants to buy the best players for the cheapest price, and that's just not how the NHL works. So the boring answer is yes to both at the right price. I'd be willing to pay more for Cousins, but I'm not shipping out a top prospect or an unprotected first-round pick really for that.
I think you are first round pick. I say yes, but I think you are right on holding on to, especially like NHL ready top prospects. That every time you see one of these players go up for sale, the teams ask, reportedly want a first round pick and an NHL ready prospect. Cool. Everybody wants an NHL ready prospect. And how many teams do you see call up guys throughout the year who are NHL ready, and you find out that they're not very good? So yeah, if there's a guy that you know is going to be good in the NHL, they're not getting traded, because what's the most valuable thing in the NHL right now? A player who is good on an entry-level deal who's making absolutely no money. So I definitely agree with you there. First round pick, to quote Michael Jordan and them kids.
Where I start to feel that way is when, and it would have to come with an extension, like, not that there's ever tampering, but you'd have to know you can extend the guy. I'm all in on Mikko Rantanen. Pay him, I don't care the number. Bring me a Mikko Rantanen.
Yes, I think that my heart there may belong to, I would love Rantanen on the Red Wings, but Frank Saravalli was on with us today and speculated Rantanen to Utah Hockey Club, and I had an experience is what I had to. I love that idea, but I want Rantanen on every if you can add an absolute stud right wing to any team, you would do it. So Rantanen, I think Rantanen's one of those guys. He's one of two wingers in the league where I would say like there's no price too high. If you can get that guy, who cares if it's even more than what Carolina gave up? And really, it maybe could be more than what Carolina gave up because you're getting him retained. So
yeah, you're getting him so cheap.
Yeah.
So looking around the rest of the league, like there are young guys available. I mean, depending on how crazy you want to get, I don't think many people are touching Elias Pettersson with a 10-foot pole right now. But at the top of the list, like you're maybe start to see the Islanders let go of guys like Brock Nelson. If the Canucks and Besser can't come to terms, what are they going to do? Is there anyone you have your eye on in general for league-wide trades?
This isn't exciting, but I'm wondering if anyone's going to bite on Rasmus Ristolainen. I think there's still an arms race for right defensemen in the Western Conference that's going to play itself out. The Stars kind of already got in on that with Cody Ceci, but I don't know, like, is $5.1 million for 2 years after this so bad for Risto, who seemingly the entire league hates? I think no. I think this is going to be a year, largely because the cap is going up in the offseason, where guys with term are going to be traded as though they're UFAs. Where like teams are going to be like, yeah, we're going to get a good price to seller's market. So yes, we'll move a Brandon Carlo or whatever. But whoever Vegas gets is going to be the answer. They're going to get Sidney Crosby for like a 3rd round pick or something, or they're going to get somebody that nobody thought would ever be traded, and we're not going to know how they have the cap space, and they don't have 1st round picks in the next 2 years, but it's still going to happen. I guess my answer is the young guys. Does Bo Byram get moved again? Does Casey Middlestat get moved again? Does Dylan Cousins get moved? Those players.
I think you hit a great point there with right-handed defensemen coming out of premium, and it might make people lose their minds. And so what I'm saying to NHL GMs is Justin Hall might not have worked for Toronto or Detroit now, but it just might work for you. So.
You know, these couples delude themselves into thinking that it'll work for them, but it might work for you.
Things are heating up.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Edmonton, Justin Hall might just work for you.
Look, you know, there's no longer the Ken Holland connection there. but Red Wings fans are constantly drawing lines to the Edmonton Oilers, and they're always like operating right at the margins. They have no room for anything, so you need to get creative, and Justin Hall is the solution.
I mean, I'm an Oilers fan, so if I'm plucking a right side defenseman off the Red Wings, I might aim a little higher, but who am I? There's a guy who wears 53 on your team. I wouldn't hate after losing Philip Broberg, but we'll see.
Things are heating up in Boston, and I am now no longer going to entertain this conversation. So DJ Bean, What Chaos Show, tell us where we can find What Chaos with you and Pete.
Everywhere, wherever you get your podcasts. We post a bunch of stuff on Instagram. We know that there are a lot of podcasts out there, and sometimes you just have to consume them in 60-second chunks, so you can find that on Instagram. We've had, from the Red Wings, who have we had? We've had Alex DeBrincat on. We've had Lucas Raymond on. We had them this year. Absolute blast. We also recently put up our video of Pro Shop Wars in Detroit, which is when we go to a team store with no budget and just spend all of our actual money. And it's not profitable. We just buy a bunch of stuff, and the Red Wings have the sickest pro shop, so that's a fun video. And we will be doing our 24-hour trade deadline stream, so just find that on YouTube. Keep it up as a second screen throughout the day, throughout the night. It gets mad, but it's a lot of fun.
Incredible. Happy to have finally done this crossover. Maybe the next time is on the What Chaos side. And
yes.
Take care, DJ. Best of luck with your 24-hour stream. You are a degenerate and a crazy person.
Thank you. That's all I ask for.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show. Again, benefits are bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones, the Discord, the giveaways, including 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, all that and lots more. Thank you so much to all of our Patreon supporters, and thank you to DJ Bean for jumping on the show. Let's get into some questions from our patrons. Thomas Gaffney says, in an alternate reality, the Wings defense could have been Seider, Wellman, Edvinsson, Hronek, Gostisbehere, Chiarot, Johansson. Would you take that alternate reality if it meant taking on Hronek's cap hit and losing ASP?
No, because short term, well, it depends. If you can get Wallman to an extension.
What year Wallman, though? The year before he got traded, or the year?
Well, he's having a great year right now. I don't know. I just still think the long term of ASP combined with the value you'll get out of his first 1 or 2 contracts
makes it tight. And you still have Edvinsson.
And you still have Edvinsson. You still have Seider. Still have Johansson.
Chiarot.
Like, it definitely prolongs the pain.
So essentially, are you trading Hronek as he is now, Gostisbehere, Wallman for ASP in the future? You got to look to the future, because
that's what I'm thinking. Like, on value, that's a terrible trade. But if we talk about the Red Wings window realistically being 3 to 6-ish years, at least like the heart of it, that's when ASP would be coming into his prime. And I know on value, it's an obvious yes, you take Hronek, Wallman, etc. But right now, as the Red Wings stand, I think they get more value down the road, which is what they need.
Eric Gilo says, ignoring the cost aspect are trade restrictions in trading for one of these defensemen, as well as some of them being a rental versus a hockey trade. Rate them for the purposes of joining the Red Wings at the deadline from most wanted to least in your opinions. Bowen Byram, Carson Soucy, Connor Murphy, Mario Ferraro, Rasmus Ristolainen.
Okay, Bowen Byram, number 1, obviously. Then it was Soucy, Ristolainen, and who else?
Murphy and Ferraro.
All right, I'll go Murphy.
Yeah.
Soucy, Ferraro, Ristolainen.
Flip Ferraro and Risto for me, and then you're there. Yeah, it gets tighter after that. Narino says, should we retain on Tarasenko and just dump him, or is there a legitimate option to get a reasonable value player in return?
God, no. If you can give him away, you do it.
Yeah, you're not.
You might have to give him away and retain half to unload the contract, which might be preferable to a buyout, because then it's 1 year of pain versus 2, but
Griffey Boy says, dread it, run from it. Prospect profiles arrive all the same. Yeah, here I was doing victory laps because I didn't start them too early, but they're still coming. In all seriousness, the Wings can still turn this around. Outside of last Thursday, their performances haven't been that bad. What area of the team needs to go on a heater in order to go on another heater, and why is it goaltending? Thanks, boys.
It's goaltending. It's always goaltending.
It's goaltending, but close behind is top line.
Yeah.
Laporta Potty says, Evan, what sweeteners would it take for you to willingly trade for expensive Elias Pettersson? So Evan's not here. We'll answer for him.
Oh my God. Lately, no, I think I've fully circled around to Evan's side on this one. He is broken. Someone posted a clip of just him walking down the left side on the power play, clean shot. And remember what kind of shot he has. Double clutches and just fumbles off a pass. Like, he is broken.
He is what the Mavs and Nico accused Luka of being. Now, like, I don't know. It would take too much retention for me at this point, and them having to give him up for nothing. It's just not how it would work. They would rather keep him.
Yeah, Vancouver at that point is better to try and fix him.
Matt says, are the 5-on-5 offense and the penalty kill only truly fixable by bringing in better players? The PK looked better when Todd took over, but that's still not a point of strength. I'm not sure what you can do offensively to be less dependent on the power play. The first, yeah, I believe so. The second, no, I don't think so. It just takes time. Sorry, I shouldn't say I don't think so. You need to be bringing in better players for the penalty kill if the ones you have aren't working, but they're not like world beaters. You can get them every free agency. They come with generic name and can be had for cheap on short-term deals.
You can fix special teams with weak players. It's just a lot harder. You cannot fix 5-on-5 offense without adding good players relative to where they are right now.
Not in big ways.
No.
So, yeah, that's like, it's what we talked about. This team kind of falls apart in terms of, the best players are injured or go on a cold streak, and then the depth goes out, and then whatever depth remains just isn't firing, and it exposes everything. Dan Stonehands Cleary says, any update on Buchelnikov? Any guess on when he'd be in North America? So Buchelnikov's actually been on a heater. I think he's at like 10 points in his last 9 games in the K, and similar to like Lombardi's profile this year, Lombardi was injured there for quite a bit, but like doing extremely well. And I think both of those guys have done what you'd hope you'd see from them this year, and not terribly dissimilar kind of notions behind them. They're not big players, they're small, and for them to find their way in the NHL, there's still a big question of whether they can survive the physicality, but they are dynamic and could bring serious offense to the team in some capacity. So I think we're seeing what we like to see from Buchelnikov. And with the Russia factor and the contracts, you just never know. Call it a couple of years.
When the plane lands on the tarmac, we'll know.
He comes to Detroit. He came to Detroit in the offseason. So there's not like there isn't interest, and it's not like he doesn't plan on coming here. But I always hesitate to say there's going to be a definite date based on like the end of contract or whatever, because we've seen players come over early, and we've seen players extend further based on like pressure tactics that the KHL puts on them. Or the pressure tactic is they offload a giant dump truck full of rubles, and then they stay in there longer because they're like, this makes a lot more sense than my ELC, and then you Kaprizov it. Okay, that is all we're going to do for this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. The longer we talk, the more we tempt fate. We will be back with you at the very latest on Sunday, but again, it could be as soon as Friday night for an emergency episode. Stay tuned. Thank you all so much for tuning into this trade deadline preview version of the Winged Wheel podcast. We're happy that we also got the Mazur news in here, because the trade deadline this year is not guaranteed to be boring, but the lead up is sure kind of like a little bland. What really is going to happen? I wish there was a win streak to go along with this.
Well, there was a streak.
There was a streak. Thank you so much to What Chaos for the first part of this crossover. And thank you so much to the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. To all of our Patreon supporters, we could not do this without you. Patreon.com/Winged Wheel podcast if you want to support the show. And if you want to support and Patreon's not for you, there's other ways you can do it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a rating, whether it's the thumbs up or the stars or the review on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that. Tell a friend about the show. It really, really, really does help. To all of our listeners, new and old, welcome to the show. Thank you for spending your time with us. And to all of our name level supporters on Patreon, we could not do this without you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Glenn Brabham, Adam Rose, Adam Zuiza, Matthew M. Rice, C. Lyon, Admiral Matt S. The Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Anna Sleeman, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Carl Brutinen Analuski, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin God Creatives, Hatrick Sandine Pelika, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, aka Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, Jennifer Morris, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Casper the Friendly Post, Lunchbox, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi, Now I Have to Learn How to Click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, R.A., Roy Donk, Ryan Britt, Sam Bankson, Skeletor, Slim Smitty Cards, Stephen Ortley, That's What I Appreciates About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Wings Fan of Chicago, Iser Plan Stan, General Indy Bohanna of the Cheesebag Army, A. Iran, Aaron Taylor, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, C.E. Hayes, Chimkum Nutgits, Chris Folinsky, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton and Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsuk Stangleberries, Drop the Puck, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Adobo, Jim, J.M. Rhapsody, Josh Yelton, Just Missed a 2-minute minor, middle finger emoji, and also go blue, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Linda Hall, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raitmond, Mitch Minier, Noted Soderblom Worshipper, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Pepto Crisco, Ryan M, Sam Miggs, Sandy P, Ray Andy, Steven, that other guy, the Hodag, the Hat 123, Trent Thorough, Vladimir Tarasenko, more like Badimir Tarastanko. Wait, thank you, Reed. Wings fan of St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll see you whenever Steve Yzerman decides we see you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.